Hello everyone, Ruby Ravel here. Do you ever wish that you could live in a land of never-ending delights, where all deliciousness and delectation would be yours forevermore, that like the gods on Mount Olympus, whatever pleasures or beauties you could surmise or sneak out in your innermost heart could be made manifest at the simple snap of a fork? If you find yourselves regularly beset by such paradisial dreams and imaginings, it could well be that you have an aspect between Venus and Jupiter in your charts. And I say this because at the moment Venus is coming into its annual conjunction with that giver of bounty and good fortune. In medieval astrology, Jupiter was considered the great benefic, this bringer of prosperity, abundance, who wielded the cornucopia, the horn of plenty. There's a wonderful tale in the Prose Edda that contains all the Norse legends, in which for the Scandinavian version of Jupiter traveled to Jotunheim, the land of the giants, where he was challenged to a drinking contest. And he was handed this horn in which there were copious amounts of ale and told to drink as much of it as he could. And no matter how deeply he drank of this, thinking himself to have quite a bit of braggadocio where the arts of consuming liquor were concerned, he found that no matter how he gulped and gulped and gulped and gulped, never did the cup seem to run out. He later discovered that it was an enchantment and that he'd actually been drinking from the ocean to the point where he'd run the risk of causing an oceanic drought around the world. But in essence, what that little symbol as part of the narrative captures the basic cacoethes of Jupiter, in that it always wants more. It always wants to find a good gold mine of pleasure and dedicate its life to pursuing it at all costs. Whereas during a Venusian conjunction with Saturn, Jupiter's curmudgeonly, cold, clawed-footed father, we feel the need to downsize, to be more frugal, to be aware of our finiteness and limitations, and to make sensible, mature adult investments for the future in preparation for the possibility of lean or difficult times ahead. Jupiter wants to believe in the never-ending goodness of the world. He wants to have faith in the ability of this existence and the existence of the other world to always find a way of bringing more meaning and joy and growth and expansion into his life, rather than feeling that he has to set limits and constrain himself and be encumbered by a discipline that perhaps later on will bear good fruits. Jupiter wants to experience those good fruits now. He wants to throw himself into the arms of the moment and allow himself to be eclipsed and euphoria filled by whatever it is that he is immersing himself in. So if Saturn conjunct Venus makes us want to cut costs and be sensible and avoid extravagance, Venus conjunct Jupiter wants to welcome the opulence available in every moment. It wants life to be a festival, an adventure, a never-ending party in which it is the principal player. Saturn, as a philosopher, can often be quite nihilistic and pessimistic. It is the part of us that is aware of the way in which reality can routinely disappoint us and reduce us to ashes. If Jupiter wants to hold the kingly court at the head of the Wheel of Fortune, Saturn is someone who has cycled round to the idea far too many times to have much faith in those transient beauties, and yet to Jupiter it is those transient beauties that makes him feel most alive, that makes him feel that life is worth living. Whereas Saturn says, one day I will die and there will be difficult days ahead, I need to be prepared. Jupiter instead says, one day I may die, but my soul is immortal and will never die. And rather than fear that imminent death and go creeping and skulking around in painful anticipation of that dreary day, I will make the most of the present by filling it with as many of the good things that I truly want. As I've mentioned in my other transit videos, conjunctions are important moments in the relationship between two planets in terms of their interconnected cycle with one another. Conjunctions are to planets what the new moon is in terms of the lunation cycle. It represents a point where one cycle is brought definitively to an end, and a new chapter is begun in search of whatever new growth, possibility, opportunity, or challenge that fresh conjunction symbolizes. In terms of this conjunction's relationship to the ending of the preceding cycle, this can represent a point where we experience a moment of harvest, where we begin to see the fruits and labors and the final fructification of whatever it is we've invested or taken risks in the year just gone. Whereas in the context of beginning a new cycle, this can be a moment in which we experience a renewal of faith. Like I said before, Jupiter can be connected to the experience of the Wheel of Fortune, that moment when we feel that upswing of momentum, of things going in our favor, that rather than like with some difficult Saturn aspects or Neptune aspects, where we feel like all of our efforts to manifest what we find beautiful in the world is being constantly stymied, eroded, and undermined. With Jupiter on our side, we can feel that things are moving forward very quickly, that we are riding the wave of good fortune, which we are trying to make the most of before it inevitably crashes. But when Jupiter is in the waning phases of its cycle, usually we've experienced some of that crash. We've experienced some of the disappointment that can come from having something that was once a gold mine turn into instead a reservoir of ashes and spent hopes. Jupiter can lift us up, but when we get dropped back down, it can be that manic depressive swing back into melancholia. It can feel sometimes as though we've been tempted towards the heights of heaven, only to suddenly be dropped back down from those Olympian clouds and subjected to all the wearisome toils of the earth, along with all of those other mortals that we once felt we had transcended or moved beyond in some critical way. But with the conjunction, we can begin to feel that renewal of faith, not just in ourselves, but our faith in the possibility of the world as an arena in which our dreams can be made manifest and brought into being, instead of feeling like the future is a place of enmity in which only disaster and danger lurk. It makes me think of the lyric from David Bowie's song No Control, stay away from the future, don't tell God your plans. That's how we can feel when we are in the claws of Saturn, feeling jaded and disillusioned, feeling like all good things happen in the world only if we protect them at all costs. Instead, we can feel again that, you know what, life has so much to give, and we have so much to give as well, that rather than Venus conjunct Saturn feeling like it has to close off from love sometimes, or to protect itself from intimacy and vulnerability, here we are willing to take a chance. We meet someone new who seems beautiful, wonderful, humorous, charming, exotic, who perhaps represents a way of life that is foreign and alien and colourful compared to ours, and we say, you know what, I'm willing to take the risk. I'm willing to see where this goes. I'm willing to see my connection with this other person as a beginning point of a romantic odyssey. Because the crucial part of Jupiter is that it is all about learning and the education and spiritual development of the soul. And it understands that in order to really develop the soul, sometimes we have to take risks, we have to take gambles, and we have to be willing to suffer those losses. But it enters into those gambles with the feeling that a potential loss, is something worth facing if it brings us potential gain instead, but that loss and suffering is also something that we could later derive knowledge and meaning from, which will expand the scope of our souls and our ability to see things from a heightened perspective. And Jupiter is all about seeing things from the biggest perspective, rather than getting bogged down in the stress of the moment and feeling so constrained and not being able to look beyond your present difficulties. Jupiter lifts us a bit into the sky, and it says, see that over there? It might be a bit grey here right now, but there's gold in them there hills. And guess what? That's exactly where we're going. This conjunction of Venus and Jupiter can sometimes manifest itself as a period of release, of emancipation and freedom and liberation after a prolonged period of constraint. It is the thing that opens up our world back to its vastness after going through a period where perhaps we felt too tightened within a narrow tunnel. For instance, at the time of the last Jupiter-Venus conjunction, back when they were both in Pisces, I'd been going through a very long period where I had been working constantly as a private carer. I was almost always on call. My life was very rigid and routine, and there was very little room left within it for any kind of spontaneity or romance in terms of a lived fantasy that one pursues in the improvisation of the present moment. And around the time of this conjunction, one of the main people that I was looking after sadly began to go into decline. And even though that was tragic, bearing in mind this conjunction was also happening with Neptune at the time, and therefore connected to sacrifices and losses, it also meant that I had more freedom to myself now that I was no longer bound to my bedridden client. I could start traveling more, I could start exploring more, I could start engaging with social events and giving more time to creativity and warmth and my personal relationships, instead of having to sacrifice everything to duty and work. And so during this conjunction, we naturally find ourselves wanting to give more time to those fleeting things that actually give a lot of joy in our lives. Whereas with the Venus-Saturn conjunction, we can hear our friends saying, do you want to go out tonight? And we say, oh no, I better not, because I'll spend lots of money and I would rather stay at home and be careful with my pennies than go out and have a good time knowing that it's going to put me in arrears. Jupiter doesn't care about that. It says, today I will thrive and I will enjoy the bounty of what is given to me in this moment, instead of worrying about tomorrow. I may die, and if I spent today sensible only to end up tomorrow in the grave, what good would that have done me? So it wants to indulge its pleasures, its passions. It wants to pursue those things that make it feel glorious, that make it feel imperial, that make it feel like a monarch of its own imaginings. So we're more likely to want to engage in celebrations and festivals and parties under this aspect, to come together with other people in the spirit of mutual good feeling and compassion. This can sometimes also be an aspect of forgiveness, whereas with Venus conjunct Saturn, we feel the need to cut off from ties that have become fruitless, to prune any branches of our social or romantic tree that are no longer fructifying in the way that we should. Jupiter conjunct Venus believes in being magnanimous. It believes in being bigger-hearted. It believes in putting aside petty differences and the squabbles and turmoils of the past and saying, you know what, I am capable of being the gooder man, of being the bigger man. I am capable of being the benevolent monarch in this context and saying, even if you've hurt me in the past, let bygones be bygones and just enjoy the love that we can give each other now, removed from the negative spirits that constrained us in the past. But on that same note, for some people, Jupiter conjunct Venus can actually represent a crisis point in their relationships. For some people, it can be experienced as a renewal. You know, if you and your partner have been working too hard, this might be a time when you go together for a holiday, or you go out and do something fun removed from your obligations to work or to your children together, if you have them. But if someone is in a relationship that feels stagnant and isn't offering that renewal for adventure, under this conjunction, we might start feeling a bit restless, especially with Venus being in Aries, well, both of these planets being in Aries as well. We might start looking romantically towards the horizon and say, there's got to be something better than this. This may have been great once, but right now it is starving my soul of the swashbuckling lust that it wants to feel igniting its marrow. And I would rather go out and gamble and find that secret treasure that will recapture the youthful vibrancy I once felt in my heart than remain in a closed system that is refusing to give me what I need. This can be a great time for undertaking new creative projects, because generally we will be more willing to indulge our imagination. Saturn can sometimes kill Venus's imagination by always worrying too much about the end results. It might say, that's a great idea, but could it be practically realized? That's a nice idea, but is anyone going to like it? That's a nice idea, but is it going to make any money? Jupiter's more likely to say to just enjoy making for making's sake. And it'll think of one project, and it'll think of how that project could snowball and turn into other projects, and it allows itself to get carried away by its own enthusiasm instead of always feeling the need to shoot itself down for the sake of being adult, mature, and sensible. This is also a transit where we are likely to want to do more shopping. Venus conjunct Saturn will probably walk through the center of town, see nice things in the shop window and say, there's no point looking. I'm not going to be able to buy anything. And the money I save on this could be used to save on heating bills, or to, put towards my children's university fund, or just put it away for a rainy day. Whereas Jupiter conjunct Venus is more like to say, you know what, bitch? Today is that rainy day. We're going to spend. We're going to go out. We're going to treat ourselves. We're going to get a nice new dress. We're going to go to a fancy restaurant. We're going to go on that cruise that we've been saying we wanted to go on for a long time, but have been put off doing. It's a time where we say, you know what? Instead of always imagining about these things, let's actually invest and make them happen now. For tomorrow, we may die. So let's live life to the fullest now. Anyway, in terms of things being overly full, I'm going to finish the video there so that I still have space on my phone, though who knows, maybe Mama will buy a new camera to this aspect if she's feeling sufficiently naughty. If you have any of your own Venus-Jupiter stories of grandiosity that you would like to share with me, please do. Contact details if you want to come to me for a reading, astrological, tarot, spiritual, or just counseling in general. The contact details will be below, as will be the link to my Patreon if you fancy being a very generous and munificent subscriber to this channel. And all abundance to you.